The Story of Squish. Episode 1. This video is a part of a series of videos that are all based on a scenario in a novel I wrote titled Mini and Kaka. It is available on Amazon Kindle if you are interested in the complete story. The characters share a common time frame and connected plot, but can be read as standalone adventures. The stories make more sense if you read or listen to them in order. The correct order and links are listed in the description. Each video takes me some time to put together, so please be patient. I am working on it. I am anxious to learn what you think of them, and of course, like and subscribe, and help me get my channel off the ground. That's if you like my work. Now, the story. Dost and Kisk were a cargo ship crew that had just completed a delivery of refined aluminum to its customer. It was usually easy to obtain junk for the return trip, but this time, they were coming back empty. The company did not like wasted return trips. Some anonymous manager assigned them to perform some preliminary mining surveys of selected unexplored planets that were located somewhere on the way back to the recycling plant. At each planet, they were to complete a few tests from orbit to determine if they had the conditions to support large mineral deposits. Dost examined the list of planets they were to visit, and his ears drooped when he came to the last one on the list. The position and movement of the ears on their big gray heads were an indicator of their emotional state. Their large pointed ears stuck out on either side of their oversized head. If they moved up, it meant shock, surprise, or happiness. If they drooped down, it meant doubt, sadness, or disappointment. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the monitor. "This one adds 2 days to our run," he whined. "Whose bright idea was this?" "Someone who doesn't have to wait in this tub for all that time," Kisk countered. "Can't we cancel out?" asked Dost. "That world is so far out. Unless they find mountains of silver laying in piles on the surface, it won't be worth the effort." Kisk took a moment to consider and answered, "No. If we skip this run, they will schedule someone else for it, and we will get the cost docked from our share." They became resigned to their fate and set the course. When they eventually reached the last planet, they initiated the standard scans from orbit. The first test was an environmental scan performed by the instruments on the ship. It determined the planet's general surface geography and atmospheric properties. The second test involves dropping special sensors to the surface, then detonating a nuclear device a set distance away. The powerful explosion generates several shock waves that travel through the planet core. When they reach the sensors, they are recorded, then transmitted to the ship. The data is later analyzed to determine if the structure of the crust is suitable for the formation of large mineral deposits. The second test had to be postponed because the first detected a large structure in orbit. The instruments were not designed for that purpose, but if the object was large enough, they would flag it. Dost maneuvered the ship to get a closer look. They could see a large orbiting structure in the distance. "Something that big? Way out here?" Kisk wondered out loud. Kisk was the senior crew member and had spent many years in space. The sensor zoomed in on the object, and a large space station came into focus. "It's a Mycenae Empire relic," Kisk exclaimed. "Yes, this is an area where you might find them," he added. "Who are they?" asked Dost. "Who were they?" would be a better question, he corrected. "They were an advanced civilization who discovered FTL travel thousands of years ago. Building many ships and space stations, they colonized a large sector of space." "What happened to them?" Dost asked. "A nuclear war on their home planet wiped out everything. The fighting spilled out to space. Nothing is left of them. Nothing except this space junk. They've been stripped of anything useful and abandoned long ago." "We come across one of these every so often. Are we going to take it back?" Dost inquired. "Maybe. We have to ask. But first we have to make sure it's abandoned." Kisk reached up and toggled a switch on the upper console that initiated a universal identification signal. No reply. He boosted the power and transmitted it again. Same result. Every craft in outer space was equipped with one if it was owned by anybody, especially something that big. "Call Squish. He should be awake and at his desk," Kisk requested. Squish's face appeared on the monitor. "What's up, Kisk?" he asked. He knew Kisk would never call him unless it was important. "We're on our last target and have come across a large Mycenae relic." He sent Squish an image. "Well, that is a big one," Squish commented. "It's been a while since we've come across one," he added. "Stations like that are mostly steel and aluminum, and those are trading a bit low right now. You need to run a purge and scan to see if there is any copper in the walls. Sometimes they leave the cables in the bulkheads, and the price of copper is very high right now. If there isn't enough to justify a move, we'll just attach a claim marker and come back when the price is right." "Okay, Squish, we'll call back when we get the results." The purge and scan is a procedure performed on any abandoned ship that is to be transported exterior to the ship. FTL drives not only transport the spacecraft, but also a large area of space around it. This area is commonly called the bubble. Objects floating in it are carried along with the ship that generates it. Before a relic such as this one is taken along in such a manner, it must be made safe. All ships carry large tanks of compressed, flammable gases. Often these tanks were not emptied before they were abandoned. A nearby ship can develop a strong static charge that can generate sparks in the tank, resulting in an explosion. If that occurs while the ship is floating in a bubble, large pieces will fly out. If a piece is large enough and strikes the wall of the bubble while the ship is in transit, T will cause it to undergo an uncontrolled collapse. Then everything in the bubble will be violently scattered throughout that section of space. A very serious safety concern. The way the problem was dealt with in the past was for a team to don spacesuits and search through each section of the ship. They would empty any tank they encountered in a controlled release. This was very time-consuming and costly. Then someone invented an easier way. It's called the slinger. It's a series of tubes connected to a central axle. A powerful motor spins the tubes at an extremely high RPM. A stream of metal spheres are fed through the center axle. They are then slung out at a very high velocity through the tubes. Thus the term slinger. Tens of thousands of small metal spheres are sprayed through the length of the ship. The majority of them will punch through the ship and continue out the far side. A few of the projectiles will puncture any tank of gas they encounter. The tank will spray out all of its contents or explode. Once this is completed, the ship will be safe to transport. Someone noticed that when the spheres hit the metal ship, many sparks ensued. If they aimed a spectrum analyzer at it, it could analyze the emissions and determine what type of metals are found on the ship. Thus the term purge and scan. Dost maneuvered the ship into position and commenced the purge. They could hear the high-pitched noise of the motor and see the thousands of sparks on the skin of the station. The sensors indicated that the purge did not result in any type of movement in the station. That was good, because it wasn't necessary to send a tug to steady it. They had to wait a while for the analyzer to process. The screen cleared, then displayed the results. When they examined the readout, both their ears popped up almost to the top of their head. "Call Squish now," Kisk ordered. Dost fumbled with the keys until Squish's face appeared on the screen again. "What did you find?" he asked. "Squish, you're not going to believe this. She's a treasure ship. Look at these numbers. Copper, gold, silver, titanium, and even tungsten. In all my years, I've never seen tungsten. All off the chart." Squish was speechless, and it took a short time to get a grip on himself. I've heard of tales of stations that were abandoned without being stripped, but I never thought that there was much to them. "Anyway, have you completed the tests yet?" "No, we need to do the core analysis. The rockets have been fueled and ready to go," Kisk replied. "Great, get it done and haul it back to the plant." "See you there," Squish signed off. 3 sensor rockets were launched to the surface, spaced a set distance apart. They took a while to reach the ground. Finally, Dost reported, "Ready signal from sensors received, and they are operational." "Great, launch the shock rocket," Kisk ordered. They could hear the rocket motor ignite. They monitored the telemetry signal all the way down, and it abruptly cut off at the correct time and place. They could see the explosion as a tiny flash. After a while, 1 sensor at a time reported in. The data was recorded and stored for further analyses. Interplanetary law required direct visual confirmation of an area. to confirm that it is uninhabited before initiating both a purge and scan and a nuclear detonation. This was too time-consuming and impractical, and space was too large for anyone to notice. "Let's go home," Kisk said. Then his ship and cargo jumped into faster than light. Back at the exec ship, Squish sat at his desk mulling over the new find. He did not call Goxus immediately. Goxus was the chief executive officer of the company and his immediate boss. He would be asleep at this time, so he sent him a text message instead. Squish worked for Co Metals and Mining as chief field executive, a company that operated several mines and refineries on numerous planets, and one metal recycling plant. That is where Kisk was taking his newfound prize, and it was also Squish's crowning achievement. Before it was built, the planets in his territory had been experiencing a shipbuilding boom, and the demand for metal was sky high. But building metal ore refineries on distant planets is very expensive, and demand in the metal business tends to fluctuate unpredictably. Old, obsolete spaceships were filling up salvage yards. On the surface, it should have been easy to set up a recycling plant and reap steady profits. Many companies tried and failed. It turned out to be an overly complex, labor-intensive, logistical nightmare. But he made it a success. He thought back to the time when he read the initial field report of the planet where they eventually built the plant, and it seemed almost too good to be true. It was centrally located in an industrial sector, although somewhat isolated, and possessed abundant geothermal energy with a mild climate with an oxygen-rich atmosphere. But the biggest question was the labor source. The report described a tribe of hairless animals that showed promise. Their hands had good dexterity and were bipedal. They showed reasonable intelligence. The primitive language they spoke was easy for the translating computer to decipher. They easily passed initial cognitive and mechanical evaluations. They had no concept of money, so there was no payroll, and they lived in hot, humid caves. This was important because it meant that they could build the facility underground. On an uninhabited planet, a large underground pit was much simpler and cheaper to construct than a building. He remembered when everyone, including Goxus, doubted the project, and how he had to twist some ears to get the necessary funding. Now he was on top. The animals worked the plant with great efficiency. They took about a third of the tribe to work the plant, and left the rest to provide food and replacements. As usual, there were a few problems to solve before the plan would run efficiently, he recalled. The females wouldn't work the machinery. They just sat around and ate. They came up with the idea to send the females back to the cave and replace them with males. "We can turn it into a fraternity," he remembered joking. "The males got along very well without the females." Then another problem cropped up, and it was dealt with more brutally. Some of the cave animals were escaping to nearby colonies. A few did not like the new masters and were making the mad dash to join neighboring tribes. Because they were adapted to their hot caves, they could only remain outside for a short time. And there were some nearby colonies within reach. The plant could not afford the depletion of animals. They solved the problem by rolling large barrels of explosives into the mouths of neighboring caves, then setting them off. That did the trick. The neighboring tribes relocated into other caves too distant for the cave animals to reach. The smelter ran so well that they rarely had to come down from orbit other than to make deliveries and to solve the occasional technical issue. He also drummed up a very profitable side business. Squish rented out some of the unused warehouse space to store a dozen fierce fighting beasts. They were used on several planets by wealthy shipbuilders for some kind of fighting game. They were hibernating so they didn't need to be fed. But they had to be careful not to wake them, because that would make them very grumpy. The plant was running smoothly, and he had a top-notch crew working the shipping and receiving in orbit. And now, a treasure ship. Things couldn't get better. Back at the plant, Maury was sitting at her console, going over various metal markets to keep abreast of current trends, and to keep awake when there was not much of anything else to do. She was the receiving and processing administrator and orbital team supervisor. While examining a graph of copper prices, a beep from her comm panel indicated that it had received a message. It was from Squish. Her mood instantly perked up when she read that he was on his way. Although it was always nice to see Squish, it was his executive ship that excited her. The converted cargo vessel she lived in was uncomfortable at best. It was constructed entirely of metal, so noise was a constant. The sound of machinery, footsteps, conversations, and anything else reverberated continuously throughout the ship. It didn't seem to bother the old spacers, but she had to wear a noise suppression hood to get some sleep. The water in the showers just dribbled out because the pipes were corroded, and it had a strange smell and color. The environmental system never worked properly, so the rooms were either too cold or too hot. The excessive humidity made everything worse. The entire ship had a bad smell. On the other hand, the executive ship was a luxury vessel. The air was fresh and clean, and the walls and doors were constructed with soundproofing material, which made the ship very quiet. The cabins were spacious with their own shower, hot tub, and large comfortable bed. The water in the shower came out clean, fast, and hot. The ship also came with a theater and game room. Squish could not get here fast enough. Squish finally arrived. He always stationed his ship a considerable distance from the plant. This is because the orbital team was often busy slicing the scrap metal with high power beams. This often produced large pieces of molten metal that flew out in all directions that could damage his ship. Waiting nearby was a tug full of excited crew. They suspended operations to party on his ship, and they didn't ask permission. They didn't need to. Life in space was harsh at best, and they deserved this. The tug docked onto the airlock, and the latch eventually opened. As usual, they all walked in carrying large laundry bags, because the washing units on the command craft didn't work very well. "Hello, Squish! Good to see you," Maury greeted as she stepped through the hatch. "You just love me for my ship," he joked. She laughed. "Busted." "What do you know about the treasure ship?" she inquired. Nothing more than what was in the message. Squish turned and said, "Listen up, everyone." Everyone turned to listen. "Kisk and Dost aren't due until late tomorrow, so we have some time to prepare. When they get here, we will need to break up into 2 work teams, because this is a big one." "We got this," Maury answered, for this was nothing they couldn't handle. They all dumped their dirty laundry into the washing units, then they went to their cabins for a hot shower. After a while, they shuffled into the dining room, where Squish had prepared a meal for them. Just basic food, but it could have been a gourmet meal as far as they were concerned. For a long time, they had been eating space grub, just for the purpose of not starving. After dinner, they sat around and talked or played in the large game room. The party went on for a while until they all went to bed. The next day seemed to last forever. They were anxious to see their treasure ship. A beep from the comm panel indicated the cargo vessel was near. They stood in awe when it dropped out of FTL. Floating in front of them was a large space station with a huge transport ship docked to it. Kisk and Dost had not noticed the transport ship until after they bubbled. It was connected on the far side of the station. Squish got a feeling in his ears that something was not right. It looked too pristine. He shook it off and stirred everyone to action. "Okay, let's see if we can find the front door." They had already donned their space garb and crawled into their microships. They were pressurized eggs. They were simpler, cheaper, and safer than regular spacesuits, and they could be fitted with various tools and attachments. When the station and ship slowed to a halt, the teams moved in. They floated around the exterior of the station, looking for an entrance. Just when they were about to break out the cutting beam, Maury shouted out, "I found an open hatch. It's on the backside of the transport ship." They converged at the spot, and Maury went in what looked like an open airlock. She floated toward the hatchway and turned on the tiny ship's external light. When she got close, she saw something that wasn't supposed to be. Some of the indicators on the walls were on and blinking brightly. "That's not right," she muttered to herself. Everything should have died centuries ago. The door at the end of the bay was open and large enough to pass through. What she saw inside was not what she had expected to see, not even close. "Squish," she called nervously. "This isn't a Masseny relic treasure ship." "What do you mean?" he asked. Take a look for yourself, she replied, and switched on the video feed. Squish turned to look at the screen and couldn't believe his eyes. All across his monitor were floating bodies, alien bodies. They were larger than them, but shared a similar physiology. The ship and station were full of them. They had shot up an occupied space station, killing everyone without knowing it. The image stunned him for a moment, but he slowly regained cohesive thought. This changes things, Squish spoke softly. Okay. We still need to know what we got. Do a cursory sweep and get back to the ship when you're done. The mood in the conference room was grim because they had inadvertently conducted a mass murder. Squish was in his cabin, briefing Goxus. The crew sat around the large conference table, talking softly. After a long while, Squish walked into the room and turned on the main screen. Goxus's face appeared. He looked somber and began to speak. You saw what happened today and are wondering what comes next. The station and ship are not ours, since they were inhabited. It will be confiscated by the Interplanetary Space Agency, ISA. We have violated dozens of regulations and laws and are in deep trouble. Squish and I have thought it over, and have determined that we are down to 3 options. Option 1. Alert the authorities as to what we have done. This will result in a criminal investigation. When it concludes, they will charge Kisk and Dost with negligent manslaughter of thousands of sentient beings. They will undoubtedly serve a lengthy prison sentence. In addition, if the ISA establishes relations with the new culture, it may extradite Kisk and Dost to face their justice system. Squish and I will be found guilty as accessories because they were following our standard procedures and may also serve some jail time. Everyone here has knowingly been working under illegal standards. You likely won't be facing jail time, but all your certifications will be revoked. The company will lose all of its operating licenses and thus go out of business. Option 2. Bubble the alien station and the transport ship into a nearby star. We erase it from the log, pretend it never existed, and go on with our lives as usual. Then there's option 3. Kisk interjected, sell it illegally, and split up the money. It's a little more complicated than that, but Kisk is essentially correct. You all know that we can easily slice up and process that beast if we ramp up the plant to full capacity. The preliminary scans indicate it's full of valuable metals, so we will all do very well. Look, I am assuming option 1 is a no-go, so it's between 2 and 3, and we all have to decide on which one. Squish and I have come up with a way for us to opt out of option 3 without anyone finding out who decided against it. We cannot force anyone to risk going to jail, so the rest of us can get rich. Squish has taken a bag and some game pieces from the recreation room. You each will take 1 white and 1 black piece. Then drop one of them into a bag. If you've chosen the black token, you voted for option 2 and white for 3. No one will see which color you've chosen. If there is only 1 black piece in the bag, then it's option 2, no argument. Squish handed each member their pieces and placed the bag on the table. Kisk said, I'll start this show, and dropped his piece in the bag. The rest of the crew followed one by one. Squish paused, he took a deep breath, picked up the bag, and looked in. His ears popped up. He flipped the bag over and spilled the tokens on the table. They were all white. Gox's ears popped up as well. Then he stated, I didn't expect this, not at all. After a moment, Maury broke the silence. No offense, Goxus, but you're a planet maggot. We're spacers and we live with risk every day. Well then, let's get the ball rolling, he finally replied. Call me if you need anything. The screen went blank. Squish turned to Maury. Send out a general message and inform everyone that the plant will be down indefinitely. We don't need any visitors for a while. Kisk, set up a continuous work schedule to chop up and melt this monster as soon as possible. You got it, boss, he answered. The plant was quite capable of such a monumental task, for it had only been operating at 18% of capacity. The additional equipment was unpacked and the process started quickly. Squish was still the company field supervisor and left to attend to some other pressing matters elsewhere. This annoyed Maury, since she had to move back to the command ship, and it smelled particularly pungent after breathing clean air. The work went quickly, and the animals on the surface didn't seem to mind the additional work. The station and ship turned out to be far more valuable than they first estimated. They didn't have to be too careful unloading such a large amount of metal on the market. Their buyers came from a variety of different planets, which made the transactions impossible to trace. While cutting up the ships, they couldn't help but feel for the aliens they killed. The station was obviously an entertainment center. It housed a hotel, theaters, gambling, and such. So many beings cut down while they were enjoying themselves. Squish eventually returned from his other duties and was sitting at the table talking with Kisk and Dost. Maury was at the communication panel monitoring metal prices in different exchanges. The intercom panel beeped and she answered, "Yes, Dosi." Dosi inquired, "Is Squish there?" Squish turned toward the microphone and answered, "Squish here. Squish, we've got a problem. We've just got a message from the chief of the cave animals. He claims some aliens have organized the cave dwellers into some kind of revolt. They're at the plant and plan to take it over. He says that they are armed with some kind of spear-launching weapons." Squish exclaimed, "You need to get down there. We are almost finished and can't afford any delay. You and Mix take Lander 1 to the smelter. Blass and Philo will fly Lander 2 to the cave. Take some stunners and weapons." Squish yelled, "Get those animals back to work." After a short time, Squish saw the comm links from the landers activate. The ships were on their way. At about the same time, all the links from the ground were cut off. "It looks like they've taken the comm center," Squish surmised. Maury turned and both eyes locked onto his face, then argued, "I tried to warn you, Squish. You can't keep any species enslaved indefinitely. This was bound to happen." Maury had repeatedly tried to convince Squish that someday the animals were going to have enough and fight back. Squish was too arrogant and entitled to listen to her. Although in the back of his head he had a gnawing feeling that it was not wise to ignore Maury. She had an annoying habit of proving him wrong. The animals were just that, animals. He didn't pay much attention to them. They should be glad they had work, he stated, despite the fact he wasn't paying them. And the fact that they trained a group of animal thugs at the recycling plant to brutally keep the rest in line reassured him that things would remain stable, indefinitely. She was about to say something else when she looked out the window and said, "Squish, look at that!" Some kind of huge alien ship just dropped out of FTL. Squish looked out and was shocked to see a large alien craft looming nearby. Squish cried out, "Where did that come from?" The exec ship was parked some distance away, as usual. "Zoom in with the monitor," Squish ordered. On the screen, they could see that a small ship was floating just below the large ship. Mossy, the operator on duty on the bridge to the command ship, yelled out through the comm unit, "Squish, what is that?" She screamed, "They're shooting at us from that little—" She was cut off, and all the links from the command ship control room went out. They could see it was covered with sparks. Kisk recognized this phenomenon and shouted, "Someone is pelting them with explosive projectiles." The small vessel below the large ship was shooting at all the ships around it. Fortunately, it had not noticed the exec ship in the distance. The stream of projectiles sprayed out at a very high velocity until they had destroyed everything in the vicinity. The bridge lights normally visible through a window on both the command and cargo ships went out. "Mossy, what's going on? Answer me. Is anyone there?" Squish shouted into the microphone. All the rest of the comm links from the cargo and command ships dropped out, and the stars visible around the skin of the ships were twinkling. That meant they were venting atmosphere. He kept shouting into the microphone. Maury put her hand on his shoulder and said, "Squish, everyone, is gone." His ears dropped, and he turned his head. The room was so quiet that when Dosi's voice broke over the speaker, it startled everyone. "Squish, is everyone all right up there? We've lost all connections between the cargo and command ships." Squish could not answer. "We're coming up on the shore. The collision warning system indicates that something is flying in from behind us. I don't see anything on the rear monitor. Wait, there are 2 bright lights coming straight for us." Then the comlink connections for both landers went out simultaneously. "Dosi," Squish whispered sadly. The bridge went quiet again. Maury asked, Who are they, and why are they shooting at us? They're striking back, Kisk answered. They're the aliens that built the station and ship we tore apart. That ship, he said, pointing out the window, is identical to the ship that was attached to the station. From their point of view, we popped in from FTL, murdered thousands of them in their orbiting station, plopped down a nuclear device on probably a populated area, then stole their station, all to support our scrap metal business. Can't imagine why they would be upset. The unexpected sudden loss of 6 of their close friends filled them with grief. It was difficult to process. Dost happened to look out the window and yelled, "Look, 2 landers are coming up." They rushed to look out with a glimmer of hope that their friends were still alive and managed to get back, but their hopes were dashed. They weren't Dosey and his team. Those were the alien ships that had just destroyed their landers. They had been dispatched to chase down their ships just as they dropped out of FTL. Squish and his crew were so focused on the tug shooting holes in their ships, they didn't notice them leave. They watched as they docked on the outer skin of the ship. The horrific events had been occurring so quickly, they had not stopped to consider how it changed their situation. No one, except Squish. Squish stood up and walked out of the control room. "I need to talk to Goxus," he muttered as he walked into his cabin. They looked at each other as he walked out, then went back to their conversation. Kisk speculated, "There must be another lander on the surface." He recounted, "Just as we popped out of FTL, the collision sensors activated. They indicated that a large object had dropped away from the far side of the station. We thought something broke off one of the ships and had fallen off. A lander and its crew must have survived the purge and flew down to the surface," Kisk surmised. A quick review of the external video recording confirmed a lander had indeed detached just as they dropped out of FTL. Maury's eyes lit up and recalled, "Dosey said that the cave animal chief told him that some aliens rallied the animals into some kind of revolt. But why would they go through all that trouble?" she questioned. Kisk thought for a moment, then determined they were after one of their FTL comm units. "We left several out in our junk pile. The units were intact, and the aliens must have rigged one of them to call for help, and were apparently successful. A while later, the large lander came up and docked with the ship. Then they all popped into FTL. The small armed ship was left behind to take care of any other ships that should drop by." Sitting at his desk, Squish thoughts now focused on the recent developments. The appearance of the aliens created many new problems. He sent Goxus a message informing him of the current situation, because, he hoped, he could come up with some kind of solution to the new developments. He sat and waited for a reply. The message popped up, and his ears dropped upon reading it. Now, he had to drum up the courage to break the news to his remaining crew. He walked in the control room with his ears so low that they almost reached his chin. He stopped in front of the group and took a deep breath. "I don't believe you all realize how much this alters things. Both the cargo and command ship are equipped with an automatic emergency distress signal generator. They are heavily shielded and are designed to survive such catastrophic events. In a few hours, they are each going to automatically transmit a powerful signal. The ISA will receive it, then dispatch a rescue team in response. We're going to have to warn them, or they will get punched full of holes when they get here. Then everything will be exposed." After a short delay, all their ears slowly dropped simultaneously. "I've just got a reply from Goxus, and he can only come up with 2 plans. One is to turn ourselves into the authorities and take our punishment. The other is to go into exile, never to return. We could spend the rest of our lives on Casino. There, we will be safe," he added. "If you needed to stay outside the reach of the authorities in relative comfort, Casino is where you would stay." Casino was the largest station in known space by far. Hotels, restaurants, family amusement parks, apartments, theaters, prostitution, drug dens, and more, all were part of Casino. Above all was Casino Bank. It was where they had deposited the money they got from selling the metal. This bank doesn't care where you got the money and won't divulge any information to anyone. It doesn't even accept names, just account numbers. It operates independently of any planet's economic and political system. This was a necessary arrangement. All the developed planets had their unique economic systems and cultures, and they needed a simple central bank to conduct business between them. The looks on everyone's face was of shock. "That's it?" Maury shouted. "No, Squish, you have to think of something else," she yelled even louder. "You know that I have only 170 days left on my contract, and I'm supposed to get back home to my son and daughter on Co. I've known you for a long time, and I know you can find another way. It's what you do better than anyone else I know. Just think." The comm panel interrupted them with a loud buzz, indicating they had received a ship-to-ship message. Confused, Squish looked at the screen. It was the Gertish. "Great," Squish sighed. "What timing?" They were a space tramp-type family that lived on a small cargo vessel that had dropped out of FTL nearby. They would pop up every so often, looking for side jobs, or to sell some exotic merchandise. "Hi, Squish. Got anything for us?" the message read. They were reliable, and more often than not, he had some work for them. "They're going to be blown away by the aliens," Kisk shouted. Squish scrambled to type back, "Sorry, we are shutting down here. You'll get a message through the infonet where we will be next." He felt guilty that he could not warn them of the threat they were under. But news they had made contact to a new species of advanced aliens would have spread through the system like wildfire. He could not let that happen. The image of the alien weapon was still on the screen, and it had detected the ship and was maneuvering to get a shot. "Okay, see you soon," they answered, and their ship disappeared into FTL. A sigh of relief went out through everyone. They left without being shot full of holes. Obviously, the general message Maury sent out had not reached them yet. Squish walked close to the window, then stood there with a blank look. He stared out at remaining section of Alien Station. The cutting robots that were previously busy slicing it into pieces had drifted off when they lost contact with the command ship. He descended into deep thought. The intense concentration caused him to lose all external control. His eyes lost focus and stopped blinking, his face turned blank, and he lost all control of his ears. They sagged down to his cheeks as he fell into a deep trance. Squish stood there for a long time in his catatonic state, then slowly he regained his composure. Everyone on the bridge was intensely staring at him. Then his right ear lifted. It was barely perceptible, but it definitely moved. "He's got something," Kisk declared. "That's not a real weapon system," Squish stated. "A technologically advanced civilization like theirs could have easily constructed a weapon that would have instantly destroyed everything around them when they first popped in. And they certainly wouldn't have a huge warship with a little tug as its main weapon," he spoke softly to himself. "It's a rigged system," he said as he began typing a message to Goxus. "They don't fight battles in space." "We're going to Saurian. We've got a job there," he casually informed everyone. Earlier, a company prospecting team had discovered substantial silver deposits on a planet in their vicinity. They decided to set up mining operations. Squish's team was to pause operations here and travel there to map out a suitable campsite near the ore deposits. Maury was puzzled and thought Squish was losing it. "I think that task would not be very high on a list of priorities right about now," she commented. Fisk was trying to figure out what Squish was planning, so he turned and stared at the ships intently, and his ears popped up. "Yes, that is an important tasking," he agreed suddenly. Then in frustration, Maury yelled, "What are you two talking about?" "You think we can get there before that thing gets a bead on us?" Squish asked, ignoring Maury. "Probably. It moves pretty slow, it doesn't know we're here, and it's looking for ships that drop out of FTL," Fisk replied. "Fine, I'll be over here when you decide to tell me what you two are planning," Maury complained, and sat down on the sofa. "It may not detect a ship sneaking up on it," Fisk added. "Still, we're rather far, and if it sees us moving before we get close enough, it may fill us full of holes." Squish wondered, what if we program a dash and snatch? Kisk took a moment, then agreed. "That's probably our best chance." "Okay, sorry, Maury. Here's the plan." They all gathered around him and listened intently as Squish explained. "We are going to make all the evidence disappear. It will seem to the rest of the universe that we got into a serious accident, and all that is left of our operation is us and a small lander. If we pull this off, we won't go to jail or exile, and we'll get rich. Before we go through with this, we need to think about this carefully, because if things don't go as planned, you can add insurance fraud, tampering with evidence, and a lot of other additional charges. Here's the plan. First, we get this ship to charge at the arm tug as fast as the maneuvering thrusters can push us. When we get to the right spot, we jump into FTL and bubble the two ships and the remainder of the alien station before that thing can shoot. Thus the term snatch and dash. This technique is used by research vessels when they need to grab something near a star. That's a suicide mission, Dost remarked. Our momentum will carry on inside the bubble, and we will be blown apart when the ship reaches the wall. Kisk explained, normally that would be true, but it won't be a normal jump. We will conduct a micro jump. We will be in FTL only for a fraction of a second. The ship will only travel a very short distance inside the bubble and never get close to the wall before we jump out. Even a fraction of a second in FTL will take us far out of this system. We will just have to hit the brakes after we drop out and come back for our stuff. Then we pack everything and jump to Saurian. I gather we are going to dump those ships into the ocean when we get there, Maury surmised. More than that, Squish explained. The information that can stick us in jail is contained within every ship's computer. Delivery and processing schedules, currency transfers, and more are lurking in these things, and we don't have the skills to delete them all. If the insurance company gets hold of any of that equipment, they're going to scour through everything with sophisticated software. With so much at stake, they will pull out all the stops in an effort to get out of or reduce their settlement. I've seen it many times, Squish added. When we get to Saurian, I will program the exec ship to bubble everything into the red giant the planet uses as a sun. We will escape in a small lander that the exec ship uses for emergency evacuations. It is a low-budget model and isn't equipped to link with external systems, so nothing can be learned from it. Everything will disappear forever. It would not be prudent to let the ships burn up in the atmosphere because uncontrolled decaying orbits are difficult to aim, and should the ships hit land, they will find them. And the investigation will result in a lot of difficult questions, like where all the holes on the ships came from. Or worse yet, what about the data on the emergency recorders that are designed to survive such a crash? For added realism, we will detonate some small explosive charges attached to the skin of the ships that will leave a small debris field in orbit. I will also instruct the exec ship to send out a distress signal before it leaves. When the space agency receives it, they will automatically transmit a rescue request to all the ships in our vicinity. Goxus will be on his way to meet us to supervise the project. When he receives the message, he will inform them he is nearby and will pick us up. In my accident report, I'll state that we had just dropped out of FTL when we experienced a tremendous explosion, followed immediately by a complete power loss. 4 of us were in the exec ship, and unfortunately, 6 were working in the main bay of the cargo ship. We tried to get to the cargo ship bay, but weren't able because the main hatchway sensor indicated there was almost a total vacuum on the other side of the hatch. Our attempts to contact them through the intercom failed. The bridge was rapidly losing atmosphere, so we scrambled to the lander and performed an emergency evacuation. We followed the standard release protocol and flew up to a higher and safer orbit. When we were finally able to look back, the ships were very far away, and we could not make out their condition. In different orbits, we drifted away from each other. As far as what happened, our best guess is that we were struck by a sizable meteor soon after we came out of FTL. It must have punctured our oxygen or hydrogen tanks, causing the explosion, then traveled through the bay and struck the main power distribution center next to the airlock. We were in a very low orbit when all this occurred, so the wreckage very likely drifted into the atmosphere. When the insurance company and the space agency show up to conduct their accident investigation, they won't find anything except a small amount of debris in orbit. And when they scan the surface and don't find anything there either, they will assume the wrecks had burned up in the atmosphere, then sunk to the bottom of one of the large deep oceans. I made our story as simple as possible, so there won't be any inconsistencies. Squish paused for a moment, for the reality of what they were about to attempt struck home. He was deliberately planning to destroy a massive amount of very expensive company assets, including the perfectly functioning exec ship he had called home for many years. It was something he could not fully process, and it scared him through to his bones. He regained his composure and continued. Big explosion, power outage, passage blocked, then emergency evacuation. Got it? Squish was alone in his office, and all the staff had gone for the day. Today was a special day. Squish, Maury, Kisk, and Dost were gathering at Goxus's mansion for dinner, since they all happened to be in town at the same time. The actual reason for the celebration was they had reached the statute of limitations for the crimes they've committed. If some loose end pops up that hints of their past activities, they can't be prosecuted. An investigation cannot even be initiated. The scheme he hastily put together worked perfectly. Kisk stated that it happened so fast that Squish didn't have time to mess it up. No one has ever suspected anything else had occurred other than a tragic accident. The biggest risk they faced with their scheme was if someone came into contact with the aliens. If that should happen, the aliens would certainly inquire into who attacked them and took their ship, then they would certainly be discovered. And although they could not be charged with a crime, the company would face serious difficulties. The insurance company might want their money back, and the relatives of the deceased may want an explanation. The unmanned probe that Goxus sent to see what the aliens that occupied the smelter were up to determined that they had set up a small outpost, but there was no sign of any major development. The chance of contact was minimized, but not eliminated. This was an ever-present fear that lurked in the back of his mind. The demise of their crewmates meant that the money was split up 5 ways instead of 11 because there was no practical way to include any of their heirs with a share without explaining where the money came from. The guilt was lessened by the fact that all of the deceased were hardcore spacers. They had lived and worked in space for so long, they had lost any contact with any friends or relatives they may have had back home. In fact, they all had opted for their company life insurance settlement to be donated to charity. Goxus went into early retirement, like all entitled aristocracy are entitled to do. In appreciation for their help and to account for their newfound wealth, they all got promoted. Squish moved into Goxus's office. Maury became his executive assistant. They made a good team. Squish had gotten so used to living in space, he went into a mild depression adapting to planet life. Then he got a girlfriend. Kisk got Squish's job, with Dost as his assistant and pilot of the new company exec ship. The insurance company was not too happy about the huge settlement, but there was nothing they could do but pay up. Catastrophic accidents in space were not an unusual occurrence. Sometimes, when everyone had gone home, Squish would stay in his office. He would view some videos and pictures that he had secretly downloaded from the ship's computers before they were destroyed. They were of the aliens' ships and all their contents. While the robot slicers were cutting everything up, they recorded the entire process. He could watch them for hours. The utensils, tools, furniture, equipment, and such fascinated him. The function of many items were obvious, but others he could only guess. This time he was examining the video of the 2 landers that destroyed his landers. The external video cameras on his ship had recorded them when they arrived. He watched as they separated from the station. As they began their descent, he noticed that one of the landers flashed as it started its trip to the surface. It had crossed through a ray of sunlight reflected off the space station. He froze the image on the exact frame the light illuminated the lander and zoomed in on the craft. Everything about it said, "Warship." He closely examined it and could easily make out the markings that had been printed on its wings and fuselage. He recognized the characters from the ones he had observed many times in the contents of the station and ship. There were about 50 or 60 different characters, but he wasn't sure if all were characters or something else. He also noticed that the aliens often varied the color, shape, and size of the characters. He supposed this was to change their meaning. He found it strange that they marked the exterior of their ships. No spaceships he ever heard of had anything printed on the exterior, since they were spaceships in space. There was seldom anyone out there to read them. But the characters on this ship were bold and must have indicated that these were important craft. They spelled out in large print, United States Air Force. I hope you enjoyed the story. So if you like my work, please like and subscribe, and I would really like to know what you think of my story. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, these videos share a storyline that begin with a book I wrote titled Meanie and Kaka. It follows the story of when Melanie Baxter, a high-powered accountant, takes on a position of chief financial officer of a troubled company on Millennia, a colonial planet. Her troubles became significantly worse when, on a routine resupply mission, the space station she was in was attacked by an alien ship. She eventually finds herself and a small crew stranded on an alien planet. Now they must find a way to ally themselves with the local aliens so they can help them call for help and get back home. It is available on Amazon Kindle.